Hello Year 11 and welcome to your last minute revision reminders for English Language Paper 1 from Mr. Akerman. So, English Paper 1, that's the one where they give you one passage from a novel, probably the beginning but not necessarily, and then you get 4 questions based around it. Question number 1 is where they ask you to just list 4 things you find out. So your tips are be really quick, give them just enough detail to get the mark, but don't just write single words. And you do not need to do quotations, but if you do quotations, that's also absolutely fine. But get through that really quickly so you've got lots of time for the other questions. What I'm going to go through next is based on this sheet, which you were given a week or 2 ago. It's also attached to the Show My Homework that led you to this page, so you can print one off if you're not sure where it is. Question number 2 is the language question. So they'll give you a passage and they'll ask you the same thing at the bottom in terms of looking at words and phrases, language features and sentence forms. So the first question to ask is, what's the point of the passage? What's it trying to achieve? Is it trying to scare you, create tension, make you sympathetic to a character? And maybe a quick sentence on that to start you. And then when you've done that, how technically does it do that? And what details allow you to show depth? So which quotations are worth picking out because they actually allow you to show your intelligence. Spend about 10 to 12 minutes on this. As a rule of thumb, you spend about a quarter more minutes than there are marks. So 8 marks, 10, 11 minutes. When you get on to 20 marks, you're looking at 25 to 30 minutes. Okay, so a minimum of 25% more than there are marks. So once you've decided what the passage is about, then you can start going into detail. Look for this sheet, also attached on Show My Homework, and this gives you things from a basic approach, so saying that it uses aggressive lexical choices or descriptive lexical choices, through to more advanced things when you're talking about stative verbs and dynamic verbs and hyperbole and oxymoron and all those sorts of things, all of which are on this here. Okay. I would suggest that you don't begin by talking about sentence length and list types. Get a few good points about language choice, word choice, lexical choice under your belt, and then start saying how the form in terms of sentence types and lengths and syntax structures like listing and things like that. Do mention those, but I think they're always better if you've said a few things about the meaning of it first. Question number 3 is on structure. Timing is about the same as for the last one. Again, first of all, what's the passage trying to achieve? What's the point of it? Is it creating tension? Is it creating a contrast? Is it building to a climax? What's the point of it? That's probably your first sentence. And then going beyond that to look technically, how does it do it? Things that I would think about then. So what's the point? After that, what are the big questions you should answer? Is it in the first or third person? What's their perspective? Are they intimately involved in the action, or are they a bit more distant looking down on it? Is there a major shift in it? So does something dramatic happen in the middle, or is there a contrast? Or is it more about a kind of cumulative build-up of something? And then basics like, does it go from big details to small details? Does it go from outside a building to inside a building? They're the big things that I would think about. And then in terms of the focus, what are the chunks within it? Is there a chunk of setting? Is there a chunk of physical description of character, for example? Is there a big chunk of dialogue? Are characters introduced? Is it because of dialogue or is it because of description? Is there a narrator commenting on things? If you're going to kind of label what the chunks of the passage are, what sorts of things would you divide it into? Structural devices, so talk about narrowing the focus, foreshadowing, cumulative effect. If there's something that's just weaving its way through and holding it all together, like references to sound or light or somebody's breathing or something like that, then you can talk about cohesion, contrast, and then transitions are just how it moves from one moment to the next. Finally, think about the effects. The one thing you don't say is it makes you want to read on or makes it easier or less boring or anything like that. But you can talk about tension, pathos, which just means you feel sorry for somebody, you have sympathy for them. Curiosity, developing a character, changing the tone is a really nice one to talk about. So in terms of how you start it, you're probably going to start by saying something about the point of the passage, answer some of the big questions about the point of view of the passage, and then, say at the beginning the focus is on, and away you go. They do expect you to use quotations, but you will not be analysing them for language. You're just using them to prove what happens in different sections. As a rule of thumb, see if you can split the passage up into maybe 3, a beginning, middle and an end. Okay, evaluation question. Most important thing about this is you're going to spend an absolute minimum of 25 minutes on it. My advice would be that when we say you can begin, work out half an hour into the exam and make sure you're on the evaluation question. You have to do well on this to do well. So the skills of it aren't really that different from what you've just done for questions 2 and 3. The difference is they'll give you a statement and you're asked to respond to the statement. So the first thing I would do is have a little bit of a think about the words they give you. If they say, is it frightening and mysterious, you might want to talk about what do you mean by frightening? Do you mean physically threatening? Or do you mean something that has a sort of moral terror to it? It's getting into somebody's psychology. So analyse their words a little bit to show that you are evaluating things, just not responding yes or no. After that, think about why you might agree, and you probably will agree. Is it because of the focus of the extract? Is it because a particular character is presented in a certain way? Is it description? Is it setting? Is it contrast? Is it tone? Is it a theme? So what's the big reason why you agree? And then after that, you're looking for the small quotations that allow you to talk about how that effect is achieved. So really you're talking about language points, maybe some structure points in there as well. I'd aim for at least 3 or 4 chunky paragraphs worth of you giving different reasons why you agree. So I agree with the view to the extent that, or if I understand the word frightening or whatever to mean whatever it is, then I do agree to the extent that. 3 or 4 of those. Okay, the second section is writing. You've got 45 minutes for this. If you remember, this is divided into 2 tasks and you choose one of them. So you'll have a picture or you'll have just a sentence asking you to write a description or a story. So remember, don't try and write stories over a long length of time. A story should really be just a description with a little bit of incident in it or movement of some kind. They can't tell which of these 2 tasks you've done, so don't worry if you think your story feels like a description. They won't know. So think about all of the things in your book that you can revise for this. So all of it I looked out of the window, different ways of doing sentence forms and lengths for effect. All of those sort of bingo exercises that we did to make sure that your sentences are interesting. In terms of bringing cohesion to your piece, remember when we looked at inventing little semantic fields? So if we did a storm at sea, we might do a semantic field of fighting. Things like that are much, much better than writing a very long piece with lots of information in it, because they're really just looking for style. And a side and a half to 2 sides is more than enough to show them the style. Also think about your paragraphing, whether you can use paragraphing for dramatic effect as well as for just dividing up your ideas, remembering not to leave any gaps between any of the paragraphs, but a short paragraph once in a while is a nice way of doing things. But think of all of those different things we looked at where you can repeat so cold, so empty, so lonely, those sorts of things. What's your thing that you're going to do? And of course, all of you are going to show them that you can use a semicolon, a dash, a colon, and double dashes as well. So, good luck guys. I hope it goes really well, and I'll see you near the exam.